Matt Gaetz appeared on the Tucker Carlson show to attempt to defend himself, although you wouldn't think that's the case based on how this conversation went down. So just to give you a little background on what he's defending himself on Tuesday, news broke that the Department of Justice was investigating whether Gaetz had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old and paid for her to travel with him, which by the way breaks federal sex trafficking laws. Three sources briefed on the probe told the New York Times Gaetz, in an Axios story later that day, denied the allegations but confirmed that he was under investigation. Gaetz says that the accusations were part of an extortion effort, and he also alleged that he and his father are cooperating with the FBI and that his father is wearing a wire. Because when someone's wearing a wire, you would want to make a public announcement about it. But with that said, how did the conversation with Tucker Carlson go? Let's take a look.
The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence.
What is the allegation? That's really not very clear from these news stories.
Yeah, again, I only know what I've read in the New York Times. I can say that actually you and I went to dinner about 2 years ago. Your wife was there and I brought a friend of mine, you'll remember her, and she was actually threatened by the FBI, told that if she wouldn't cop to the fact that somehow I was involved in some pay-for-play scheme, that she could face trouble. And so I do believe that there are people at the Department of Justice who are trying to smear me.
So there's a lot to unpack there, John. Yep. I'm gonna let you take a stab at it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's what Tucker was thinking. There's just so much here and I wish there was less. Yes, so he's had a very interesting defense strategy over the past day. He said there, the idea that I traveled with a 17-year-old is verifiably false. The travel, look, is an important component when it comes to the actual sex trafficking laws, because that's the illegal part, is crossing state lines and having money be involved. He didn't deny having sex with a 17-year-old there, which I feel like I would do if it weren't true. I would want to make clear that people knew that I was not, as a late 30s congressman, sleeping with a 17-year-old girl. I would want that. That would be nice. Also, he says the travel allegations are verifiably false. People can check my travel records. Okay, I mean, if it's in there, that might prove that it happened. It not being in your official travel records doesn't prove that it didn't happen. But anyway, all of this will be.
John, hold on. I mean, I think that was actually a valid point, because I too keep logs of who I'm fornicating with when I'm traveling, obviously.
I've read
those
those notes.
Travel arrangements. Like, what a stupid thing to say, right? Like, oh, I'm potentially breaking sex trafficking laws with what I'm doing. Let me make sure that there's proper documentation of that. Anyway, but continue, sorry.
Yeah, and like sometimes I'll be in a store and I'll think, I really want to shoplift. Let me add it to my to-do list. No, that's not how crimes work. Also, making it about somebody attempting to extort you, I get that. Whether it's true that it's happening or not, I get it. And I'll even go so far as to say, I assume that it is true that someone is trying to extort him. I think a lot of people are missing that doesn't mean the crime didn't happen. It actually kind of indicates that it's more likely that the crime did, because you can try to extort someone for something they haven't done. Especially with being a Republican congressman, though, they're unlikely to go down for crimes they did commit, let alone ones they didn't. I would rather extort someone for a crime they committed. So I get him wanting to make this whole conversation about this DOJ guy that's like messing with his family, but the DOJ guy could be messing with his family because Matt Gaetz had sex with a 17-year-old and was bringing her across state lines. So all of that is really important. We also, whether it's a crime or not, we'll see. Whether he did anything or not, we'll see. But even I think we have to make clear whether he is going around trying to begin relationships with 17-year-olds, because whether that's legal or illegal, I think it's noteworthy for a public servant.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with you on that. Well, look, obviously we don't know without a shadow of a doubt that he did what's being alleged or what he's being investigated for. So our commentary, just to be clear, is really speculative at this point. But I think it's easy to make educated guesses based on the character of the people that we're talking about. And Matt Gaetz is the type of person who can lie to the American people with a straight face. He certainly did it incessantly during the Trump administration. He did it incessantly when it came to the 2020 general election. So it's really hard to take anything that he says seriously or at face value, considering how willingly deceptive he's been in his short tenure in Congress. So we'll see what happens through the outcome of this investigation. But as he was talking in that interview, I couldn't help but think about similar types of claims that were made by Trump's lawyers in response to the outcome of the 2020 election. There was a lot of like, I demand that this gets released and that gets released, and we have all this evidence. Wait till you see all the evidence. The evidence is gonna come out and you'll see. And of course, there was no evidence. And so it might be different in this case with Matt Gaetz, but if I had to share my opinion, he's not a trustworthy person. With that said, though, I love that he's trying to relate with Tucker Carlson in this next clip.
I'm not the only person on screen right now who's been falsely accused of a terrible sex act. You were accused of something that you did not do, and so you know what this feels like. You know the pain it can bring to your family, and you know how it just puts people on defense when you're accused of something so salacious and awful.
You just referred to a mentally ill viewer who accused me of a sex crime 20 years ago. And of course, it was not true. I'd never met the person. But I do agree with you that being accused falsely is one of the worst things that can happen.
Oh man, just in case, I want to remind people, as I did on the damage report this morning, that might or might not be what Matt Gaetz was referring to. But Tucker Carlson was also accused of sexual harassment by a frequent Fox News guest last year, not 20 years ago, and it was a woman he very much met. Whether it happened or not, we can't say. But there are far more recent accusations against him than the thing he's referring to.
What was also fascinating was the post-interview commentary from Tucker Carlson. Let's hear what he had to say.
You just saw our Matt Gaetz interview. That was one of the weirdest interviews I've ever conducted. That story just appeared in the news a couple of hours ago. And on the certainty that there's always more than you read in the newspaper, we immediately called Matt Gaetz and asked him to come on and tell us more, which, as you saw, he did. I don't think that clarified much, but it certainly showed this is a deeply interesting story, and we'll be following it. Don't quite understand it, but we'll bring you more when we find out.
I mean, that's a strong claim to make for a man who's had Rudy Giuliani on his program on multiple occasions. But I get it. I mean, if someone brought up uncomfortable accusations that were, made against me, I would not like that interview and probably respond to it in a similar way. But what I think is interesting about the story is how there is a divide among conservatives on how they're handling this, right? Because. And you'll see in a story that we're gonna do a little later from former White House staffers, there are conservatives who deeply dislike Matt Gaetz and are not defending him. But then there are some conservative lawmakers who should probably, just out of their own self-interest, avoid commenting on the story altogether. And the person that I'm referring to here is Jim Jordan, Representative Jim Jordan, who told CNN, quote, "I believe Matt Gaetz." How about you sit this one out, Jim Jordan? Because you've been accused of hiding or brushing under the rug the sexual assault of wrestlers who came to you and disclosed what they had dealt with. So It's crazy how Jim Jordan is still in Congress. He seems untouched by that scandal. Hopefully, we learn more about it. If he is actually guilty of what he's being accused for, suffers the consequences of that. But with that said, I mean, if I were Jim Jordan, I would probably just shut my mouth. But he couldn't help himself.
That'd be great advice. I'd love if you would take you up on that. Yeah, he believes him. Okay, whatever. Like, yeah, they believe the guy in all of these cases. That's hardly new. We don't have to make this a big part of this, but one of the most vocal defenders so far has been Marjorie Greene, a person whose entire wackadoodle, to pick up Brett's term, worldview is based on the idea that there is a shadowy cult of powerful political people who are preying on young girls. But when she comes across someone who might fit into that group, no, I believe him, it's a witch hunt. And again, we don't know what he did or when he did it, but she is predisposed to assume that someone she likes and agrees with politically cannot obviously have done that. It's just, somewhere there's somebody, Hillary Clinton, or somebody's raping kids, I don't know who. But yeah, they're of course gonna believe him, or they're at least imply. It's, at the end of the day, it's a sexual harassment, sexual assault claim. They don't care about that. They've been very clear and very consistent about that. They can change everyone.
It's literally a sex trafficking claim. It is literally an accusation of sex trafficking of a minor. That is literally what QAnon. Exactly.
But it doesn't matter. They don't care about that. They didn't care about Epstein. They don't care about Trump stuff. They don't care about any of the specific ones. And to pretend, just recently with Cuomo's scandal, the hosts were all pretending, oh yes, no, now we take all of this stuff very seriously. Got to believe the women and all of that. And then they go right back to, no, we're just gonna have him on to talk about it. Tucker Carlson, so confused about this story, arguably could have reached out to the journalist who'd written it for some details, or perhaps a contact at the DOJ or something. No, we should only bring on the victim to lose his mind on camera.
Yeah, and to Tucker Carlson, the story is not that complicated. I read it within a 4-minute break on the show yesterday. It's pretty straightforward. You just have to read. You have to read the article. But sometimes that can be really difficult to do, with all the busy schedule stuff that he's got going on.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.